I have a long history with the Pokemon series. I've been playing since I first picked up Yellow 19 years ago, and my 6-year-old mind was totally captivated by the world it created. The creatures, the locales, the sense of adventure, all of it was nothing short of mind-blowing to me back then. But as the years have gone by, my love and affection for the series has started to crumble. I'm not sure if it's that I've grown out of the series necessarily. If anything, getting deeper into the series was the reason I've stuck with it all these years. But I believe something in Pokemon has changed. Ever since X and Y, the series has been shedding features and simplifying itself to a point where I'm no longer satisfied with it. It's to the point where after my extreme disappointment after Ultra Sun, for the first time I completely skipped out on the next main entry in the series, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. As of writing this in late July, I'm not interested in Sword and Shield, something I never anticipated saying. I got curious though, how much of this is a me problem? And how much of this is a problem with the direction the games themselves are taking? With that, I've decided to challenge my preconceptions about how the series has progressed by replaying and analyzing every main game in the series, using the definitive version whenever possible, starting with Generation 1. Throughout the series, I plan to cover in-depth the region design, battle system, Pokemon variety, and post-game content for each game. Although competitive Pokemon is a big part of why I like the series, I won't dedicate much time to it if it isn't necessary. For the sake of clarity, post-game content includes anything you can only do after the game is finished, as well as things that are possible to do during the main storyline but are significantly time-consuming. I'll be introducing concepts as they appear in the series unless I cannot find another place to fit them in which case they will be covered during the intro. Basic concepts will not be repeated. If you still need my help figuring out that water beats fire by the time X and Y roll around, I truly cannot help you. Hopefully this will keep me from having to repeat myself every time a concept comes around, and should hopefully make subsequent videos shorter or on par with the length of this one. The first major choice for the player happens before you even turn on the game. Which version do I play? It doesn't seem like a big decision, and for the most part it really isn't. But what version you pick determines a few Pokemon you will and won't be able to catch. Most paired versions have a third version that is the definitive version, Yellow to Red and Blue, Crystal to Gold and Silver, and so on. But even those versions are missing Pokemon you can freely catch in the other two versions to incentivize interaction between players. My decision to play Red has to do with how Yellow deviates from the structure almost every game in the series afterwards adopts. I'd still say Yellow is the definitive Gen 1 experience, but Red and Blue lay the groundwork better for how the rest of the series operates. If I were to use any of the exclusive Pokemon on my playthrough, I would pick Blue, since its exclusive Pokemon are objectively better in terms of stats and move pools in most cases, but since I'm not, I'm going to play Red. With that out of the way, let's start a new game. When you select New Game, you're introduced to Professor Oak, the world of Pokemon, and are given the option to name yourself and the character who will be your rival for the entire game. From here, you're dropped into your bedroom and can interact with the stuff in your room. More curious players can go to the PC to find the item storage system and withdraw a free potion. Heading downstairs, Mom is the first notable NPC. Talking to her points you next door, which points you to Oak's lab, which leaves you at a standstill with your only option being to go into the grass where you'll find Oak. He tells you how it's dangerous to go in tall grass because wild Pokemon live there, and takes you back to the lab to get your first Pokemon, another important decision that has a slight effect on the game's difficulty. Your options are Charmander, Squirtle, and Bulbasaur, a fire, water, and grass type respectively. After picking your favorite, your rival immediately picks the Pokemon yours is weak to and comments on it looking stronger than yours. What a jerk. When you go to leave, he challenges you to your first battle. This isn't much of a fight at this point, but it teaches you the fundamentals of the battle system. You each take turns performing moves that have a type assigned to them, use power points or PP to pull off, can damage your opponents or affect their stats, and at this point that's about it. Winning the first battle is a crapshoot, but if you pull it off, you're rewarded experience points and will level up, demonstrating the importance of fighting other Pokemon to make yours stronger. You'll also earn money, showing you the importance of engaging in trainer battles early on. You'll encounter wild Pokemon on the first route, which you can fight against to get more experience, and you'll probably learn your first move around here. This move is the same type as your Pokemon and introduces the concept of same type attack bonus, which boosts a move's power when it's the same type as the user. You'll also find another NPC who will give you a free potion, rewarding players who talk to NPCs and incentivizing those who haven't so far to talk to people. In Viridian City itself, you'll immediately notice the Pokemon Center, where you can heal, manage Pokemon, and use link cable features for free. And looking around the city will bring you into a Pokemart where you can buy things after taking care of the errand they spring onto you. The more curious player will discover a house that teaches you about status conditions and a gym above a ledge you can't get to because of an old man lying in the middle of the street. Going back to Pallet Town, you learn you can jump down ledges and deliver the parcel to Oak, who gives you the Pokedex, a huge optional side quest that tasks you with living up to the series tagline and catching all 150 Pokemon. Just seeing them won't count, you must catch them. How do you do that? If you can't figure it out yourself, the old man from earlier will be happy to show you. Meanwhile, your rival taunts you and says he'll tell his sister not to give you a town map. What a jerk. If you decide to go there anyway, she'll give you one. A town map will probably help new players out, but experienced players are free to proceed without it. Coming back to Viridian City, curious players may head left onto Route 22, where you'll find an optional rival battle. And if you hadn't learned how the type system worked already, this will teach you, as your rival starter has a move that is super effective against you. Poor planning will almost certainly guarantee a loss here. Win or lose though, it's impossible to proceed forward as the guard of the Pokemon League gate says you will need the Boulder Badge to pass. On the way back, you'll probably notice a lone NPC in an inaccessible area you might want to return to later. You'll probably also notice the pointless Bush Junction, which gives you a potion for examining it from the left. Checking the gym in town reveals that it's locked, so we must head north. I really admire how this game approaches tutorials. Everything the player needs to know is laid out in plain sight in the first two towns, but it's all optional, and most players will grasp core concepts without having to resort to any of the tutorial content. Moving on, along the way to the next area, you'll see more weird trees and what looks like a Pokeball to the right that's out of reach, another place to return to later. The gate ahead leads to the game's first dungeon, Viridian Forest. It's described as a natural maze, although it's hard to classify one circle and a zigzag as such. Regardless, it does its job as an introduction to exploration-focused areas you'll find throughout the region, and shows the player that the random Pokeballs on the ground contain useful items. This is also where you'll come across your first trainer battles apart from your rival. These are bug catchers, and like the name implies, they train bug types. Trainer classes tend to carry similar Pokemon, so you'll eventually get a handle on what kind of Pokemon to expect when you come across different trainer classes. These guys are designed to be easy enough to get through with practically anything, but the small potential difficulty spike at the end with the level 9 Weedle will probably introduce new players to the fact that trainer battles cannot be run from like wild Pokemon battles. Younger players especially may find themselves going out of their way to avoid trainer battles as a result and will suffer the consequences of being underleveled for mandatory challenges ahead. This is also where you're likely to experience the poison status, one of the many non-volatile status conditions found throughout the game that affect your Pokemon in different ways and linger after battle. Poison saps your health gradually as battle progresses and as you walk around the overworld. Burns cut your attack in half and sap your health. Paralysis corridors your speed and has a high chance of making you lose a turn entirely. Sleep makes you unable to move for a few turns, and the rare freeze status completely immobilizes you for the rest of the battle. Soon enough, you'll be out of the forest and can spot a cave you can't access yet behind another bush, leading you into the next town, Pewter City. You'll find the same basic amenities from Viridian City here: a Pokemon Center, Pokemart, and NPCs who give basic gameplay information. In particular, there are two NPCs that are more than happy to take you on a journey to one of the city's landmarks. One takes you to the museum, where you'll see another blocked off area guarded by a bush to the side and discover fossils of ancient Pokemon, and a model that has aged incredibly well. The other NPC is in the path leading out of the city and is more than happy to drag you to see the gym, and if you want to move on, you have no choice but to tackle this challenge. Pewter City's gym establishes the basic formula of a gym going forward. Into Generation 1 is a consequence of the hardware, most gyms follow a very similar formula. Each gym has trainers and a gym leader at the end. Trainers are sometimes skippable, like this one, but are often mandatory challenges before the gym leader at the end. This gym's leader is Brock, who has rock-type Pokemon that may give newcomers a hard time. It's at this point the game's soft difficulty modifier via starter Pokemon choice comes into play. Since each gym is themed around a specific type, some starters have an easier time early in the game but a more difficult time later on, and vice versa. In this case, since rock types are weak to water and grass attacks, Bulbasaur and Squirtle will breeze through the gym, while Charmander will have a tougher time. Although due to the low special stat of Brock's Geodude and Onix, it's easy enough to brute force your way through the battle. Defeating Brock nets you your first badge, the Boulder Badge, which lets you use Flash outside of battle, though this doesn't mean much for now. It also nets you your first TM, an item that can teach a Pokemon a move provided it's capable of learning it, but only once. These vary wildly in usefulness, and the first one you get isn't great. Bite isn't awful, but more often than not, if you can't suck up hits, you won't get much out of the move. Every gym victory from here on out will net you a badge and a TM used frequently by the gym leader in question. You could go back to the Pokemon League gate and be told you need the next badge, but most people will be content moving on to the east. The next route is a small gauntlet of trainer battles, a great source of experience but tiring to get through, especially since one of the trainers uses Ekans, a Pokemon you'll come to hate this generation because of Wrap, an attack that deals pitiful damage but restricts you from moving or switching out. Get used to that, because there are a lot more Ekans where that came from. By this point it's likely you will have experienced a Pokemon evolution. Many Pokemon evolve by leveling up, becoming stronger and occasionally changing type. Seeing how your Pokemon changes as it grows is inherently satisfying, and the only reason to have your Pokemon stay unevolved is to learn moves at a faster rate, which typically isn't worth the wait. It can be occasionally though, as we'll find out later on. At this Pokemon Center, there's a man selling a Magikarp for 500 Pokédollars. Magikarp unevolved is next to worthless, knowing only one move that cannot deal damage. However, it's one of the prime examples of evolution making a Pokemon better. Gyarados, its evolved form, is one of the best in the game, and getting a Magikarp here early might be handy if you're willing to have it lead your party and let it get experience from switching out. Here we enter Mount Moon, where you'll very quickly notice that you can be attacked by whale Pokemon at any point here. This is how many caves and abandoned places in the series operate, so you better have brought repels or you'll get well acquainted with Zubat and Geodude. Mount Moon is a lot bigger than Viridian Forest and has a lot of optional content rewarding those who go off the beaten path with powerful items such as a rare candy, which automatically increases a Pokemon's level, and a Moonstone, which is the only way to evolve specific Pokemon. Around this time, you'll probably get the opportunity to learn a new move to replace one of your 4 existing ones, which brings us to a major problem with Generation 1. When you learn a new move, you'll have to figure out what it does by name alone. You were never given any information about the power or accuracy of any move you have, and just have to hope that the move you just learned is better than what you had before. Is Mega Punch better than Scratch? Better hope it is, or you just wasted what might be the only Mega Punch TM in the game. Moving along, this is the first time you'll encounter the main antagonist of the game, Team Rocket. They have some surprises. One of them uses Eradicate, and almost all of them pack poison Pokemon, but for the most part they're pushovers who aren't a real threat. At the end of the dungeon, you're forced to battle a Super Nerd who is much more of a threat than any Team Rocket member so far, but after you defeat him you'll select a fossil which will come into play later in the game. The game makes this into a choice, but like any sane person, we'll choose the Dome Fossil here. After exiting the cave, you'll eventually jump the ledge and find that there's no way back. You have to press on to Cerulean City. Cerulean City has the same amenities as usual, along with an NPC who tells you what all the badges do for you, a bike shop with ludicrously priced bicycles that you could literally never afford, and a police officer guarding the entrance of a house. The option to challenge Cerulean Gym is available if you want to try it, but unless you started with a Bulbasaur or are extremely stubborn, you're better off trying again later on. Your rival has beaten you to the punch here too, and when you go north he challenges you yet again and is probably the biggest threat you have to face so far. His starter is unevolved, and he has an Abra that only knows Teleport, which doesn't do anything against you, but his levels are fairly high and going in unprepared will lead to a rude awakening. After that, you're off to the north and must face the Gauntlet of Nugget Bridge. The stretch leading to Bill's house isn't particularly difficult, but will certainly be taxing on your health and power points. This leads into another issue with Generation 1, moveset diversity. Being the first game in the series, it's excusable to some degree, but there aren't a lot of moves for each type, leading to situations like this one with Charmeleon, who won't learn a fire move more powerful than Ember until level 42 if it doesn't evolve before then. TM's compatible moveset, but often you'll find yourself struggling to assemble a proper moveset in the original games. Soon enough you'll get to Bill's house and discover that he has managed to turn himself into a Pokemon. Like any reasonable person, I'm going to tell him I'll help him, and walk right out the door. Nah, I'm not that cruel. I'll help. For our troubles, we get a ticket for the SS Anne in Vermilion City, and walk back to Cerulean where the house from earlier is unblocked. Upon entering the house, we find that the place has been ransacked and there's a huge hole in the wall leading to the backyard. The owner says he had a TM stolen, and indeed the thief hasn't gotten far. After whooping him, he relents and gives you the TM, which the owner graciously lets you keep. Now that we can proceed, heading east reveals that the path forward is blocked by another small tree, so south it is. In the middle of the route is a daycare where you can leave your Pokemon and have them gain experience as you travel. It's woefully inefficient, costs money to use, and may result in moves you wanted to keep getting overridden, so there's not much use for it now, but that will definitely change in future games. There's another gate to the south, but the guard here won't let you through but complains about being thirsty, something to remember for later. For now, all we can do is go into the underground path to Vermilion, where you can find some useful items hidden on the ground. After a short walk and a few trainer battles, we enter Vermilion, which has quite a few points of interest. The first is the Fishing Guru, who will give you... I've been neglecting to mention this, but one of the major flaws of Generation 1 is the small bag size. You can only carry 20 items total. It's really easy to find yourself hurting for bag space unless you're diligent about selling, tossing, or depositing things you don't need. Anyway, he gives you a fishing rod, the Old Rod, which can be used near any body of water to fish up Magikarp, and only Magikarp. Not great, but it's something, and hey, you saved 300 Pokédollars if you didn't buy the one from earlier. Moving along, there's also a trainer who requests a Spearow in exchange for a Farfetch'd. This is one of a handful of in-game trades where you can't find the resulting Pokemon in the wild, which makes this handy for Pokédex completion. The problem though is that Farfetch'd has terrible stats that don't really get better. It's one of the worst Pokemon in the game and teaches the valuable lesson that not all trades are made equal, and rarity doesn't necessarily mean quality. Finally, there's the Pokemon Fan Club, where upon listening to the chairman ramble, you're rewarded with a Bike Thatcher. This will come in handy when we return to Cerulean shortly. There's more to do to the east of the city, but for now we'll head down to the harbor to board the SS Anne. The SS Anne is full of optional trainer fights. It's a great source of experience and one of your limited sources of money, so fighting every trainer in here is recommended. At a certain point, you'll encounter your rival again, who continues to boast about how much farther ahead he is. What a jerk. His team will likely be a challenge for those who have been slacking fighting other trainers or spreading their experience too thin across their party, but most players should have ample options to take his team down. After this, you'll head into the captain's room where you help the seasick captain in return for your first HM cut. HMs, unlike TMs, are infinite use and permanent. Once you learn them, you cannot remove them. This is good in that it means the player can't trap themselves with no way out, but some HM moves are generally bad. Unfortunately, the first two you'll get, Cut and Flash, are poor moves in battle. Some people carry around extra Pokemon to get around this, and I will be doing the same. With Cut in hand, we can exit the ship and immediately use Cut on the bush guarding the gym, where we find probably the worst puzzle in the entire franchise. One of the trash cans in the room has a switch that unlocks the door with the second switch right next to it. The problem is that the switch is in a random location and the second switch is also random. It can be to the left, right, north, or south of the first can you check, but a bug also makes it so that the second switch can possibly be in the same can as the first or in the upper left can in the room. This isn't a puzzle so much as it is busy work, and fortunately for us, puzzles can only improve from here. Lieutenant Surge has the highest level Pokemon we've seen thus far and thus can pose a challenge for players who started with Squirtle. What undermines this, however, is that ground-type Pokemon are immune to electric attacks, and there just so happens to be a cave next to the city in plain sight where you can catch Diglett, a fast ground-type Pokemon. And since you were given Dig earlier, you can immediately have a Diglett with a strong ground-type move. In any case, soon enough we'll claim the Thunder Badge and can use Fly when we come across the HM for it. Speaking of Diglett, there's two areas to the east we can go to now. One of them is a handful of trainers, but you'll find a sleeping Snorlax blocking your path right past the gate. You can go through Diglett's cave, where you'll find yourself outside Viridian Forest. Going through the gate to the south, you'll find one of Professor Oak's aides who will give you the HM for Flash if you've completed the incredibly easy task of having 10 Pokemon recorded in your Pokedex. If you're so inclined, you can clear out all the areas guarded by bushes mentioned earlier, but all of this is completely optional, including Flash, which is one of 2 HMs not strictly necessary to finish the game. Eventually, we'll find our way back to Cerulean City, where we redeem the Bike Thatcher for a new bicycle, granting us significantly faster movement speed in the overworld, and can finally continue past the tree onto Route 9. Route 9 is relatively short and not very noteworthy beyond this trainer's Bellsprout, which paralyzes you and uses Wrap, trapping you in a battle that takes ridiculously long, at a point that is sure to give traumatic flashbacks to a certain group of people. After a Pokemon Center at the end, we come to Rock Tunnel, an infamous landmark that is pitch black, requiring Flash to light it up. Despite what many veterans of the series might think, Rock Tunnel is actually incredibly short. It's more linear than Viridian Forest and contains absolutely nothing but wild Pokemon and a gauntlet of trainers. The reason for its reputation as a difficult area is more to do with the fact that not everyone will have Flash going into the cave, forcing them to navigate through it in the dark. And though the trainers here average about level 20, there are quite a number of mandatory encounters, with even more if you're stumbling around blindly, and the number is even greater if you aren't using repels. If you did get Flash, I hope you put it on a Pokemon who isn't one of your main party members, because Rock Tunnel is the only place in the game where you can use Flash. Eventually, we stumble out of the cave and into Lavender Town, one of the most infamous places in the series. Right off the bat, the music gives the place an eerie atmosphere, and various NPCs tell you about Pokemon Tower, a massive graveyard presumably for all of Kanto, and how Team Rocket killed a Pokemon's mother. The mood of the area is very dour, an impressive feat on the original Game Boy. The odd one out here is the Name Raider, a jovial old man who lets you rename your Pokemon, except if they're traded, in which case they cannot be renamed. You're forever stuck with Dux the Farfetch'd, Marcel or Miles the Mr. Mime, Mark the Lickitung, and Lola the Jinx. Also of note here is that around this time you can purchase Great Balls. Great Balls are better at capturing than Pokeballs, and Ultra Balls are better than Great Balls. And there's some edge cases where that isn't true, but I'm already worried about this video rivaling Shaymay's 7-hour-long Omega Ruby review, so let's move on. After ascending the first floor of Pokemon Tower, you'll meet your rival again. Did he seriously lament not being able to kill my Pokemon? What a jerk! As usual, he's not overly difficult, but isn't a pushover either, and his team is starting to fill out, as he has Pokemon to fill the slots of the 3 basic types not filled by his starter. After dispatching him, you can move up the tower, but you'll find that all the wild Pokemon are ghosts. You can't hurt them, but they can't hurt you either, and you'll eventually reach one near the top that won't let you through. You can proceed south out of town, but will quickly be stopped by the Snorlax mentioned earlier. The way forward now is to the west, a short route with another entrance to Saffron City you can't go through and another underground path, this one taking you to Celadon City. Celadon is another city with plenty to offer in terms of unique locations. First is the Celadon Mansion, where Game Freak lives? I don't know whether it's weirder that Game Freak lives here or that Game Freak lives in their own game. Either way, the director will tell you to come back when you complete your Pokédex, and he actually does have a reward for doing so, but we'll get back to that later. You might notice the back door, and if you go there yourself, you'll be rewarded with Eevee, a unique Pokemon that uses elemental stones to evolve into 3 different forms. Next up is the department store, the largest shopping facility in the game that holds most of the game's miscellaneous items. There's a small selection of TMs, evolution stones, stat medicines, and stat boosters you can only find here. Stat medicines boost hidden stats called Stat Experience, a hidden value that affects stat growth as you level up. You might notice that there aren't any ethers or elixirs sold here. These items aren't purchasable in any game in the series, being rewards for exploration and fairly difficult to come by. 2 NPCs here also teach you about trade evolutions. That's right, some Pokemon only evolve when traded. If version exclusives weren't enough, here's another reason you need both of a pair of games to complete your Pokédex. On top of that, traded Pokemon also get an experience boost, so why not just borrow your friend's level 100 starter and plow through the game? We'll get to that, but in the meantime let's go to the roof, where we can get a drink and an incredibly brief side quest where all it takes is 14 steps and a few hundred Pokédollars to get 3 great TMs. Wondering about the city more, you can spot the gym in the distance, and all of the locals are talking about the game corner, how Team Rocket is involved, and how there's a secret basement with a switch behind a poster. Intriguing, but we'll stop there after we tackle the gym. This one's a grass-type gym, and the lack of Pokemon and move diversity is starting to set in here. Again, it's an excusable problem since this is the beginning of the franchise and there are only so many Pokemon lines available for each type. But every Pokemon in the Bellsprout line knows a combination of Wrap and a major status move. I've mentioned it a few times already, but Wrap is ungodly irritating and eats up so much time for how little damage it actually does, and you better hope you aren't asleep or fully paralyzed once it ends, or you're in for even more wasted turns where you're totally helpless. Besides that, however, you'll probably have Pokemon with fire, flying, ice, or poison moves that will handle Ericas with relative ease, and then it gets the Rainbow Badge, which gives us the ability to use Strength and makes Pokemon up to level 50 obey. Not your Pokemon, mind you, traded Pokemon. Yours will always obey you, but traded ones will only perfectly obey you when they're at or under the level corresponding to your most recent badge. Otherwise, they have a chance of disobeying orders. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the game corner everyone's talking about. Inside, there are slot machines littered throughout the building that you can actually play when you get the coin case from another NPC in town. You smooch off the patrons and scrounge around the floor for some coins to get started, and you're off! Too bad the slots, as in real life, are rigged against you. It's usually more worthwhile to just buy the coins than try to win them. And winning coins can get you some neat prizes, including a few rare TMs and even rare Pokemon. In Porygon's case, this is the only way to obtain one. Investigating the poster we were told about earlier, we find a Team Rocket grunt that confirms this is Team Rocket's hideout, a multi-floor dungeon filled with Team Rocket members and moving floor tile puzzles that are arduously slow. For being the main antagonists of the game, Team Rocket's Pokemon aren't much of a threat, especially at this point. About the worst they can do is poison you, and that's if they even get the chance to begin with before you knock out their first stage Pokemon. After beating one particularly smart grunt with the lift key, you'll find your way to the basement where you finally meet the leader of Team Rocket, Giovanni. Giovanni's team is relatively tough, consisting mainly of ground types and a tough normal type. Their movesets, like many others in the game, are lacking though. His Rhyhorn in particular only has one move. He'll be taken down in short order and drop the Silph Scope, the item required to reveal ghosts in Pokemon Tower. So with that, it's time to go back to Lavender Town. Before that, let's take a few short detours. To the west of the city is Cycling Road, which is blocked by another Snorlax. If we take the back way in, we can't get to the road itself, but we're rewarded for our efforts with the HM for Fly, which lets us travel back to any town we've already visited. It's tempting to fly directly to Lavender Town from here, but let's go through the gate to Saffron City. With fresh water in hand, we can give that to the guard, who promises to share the single bottle of water with his fellow guards and lets you into the city. There's quite a bit to do here, but it won't completely open up until a short time later. Returning to Pokemon Tower with the Silph Scope, we can now identify the ghosts in the tower and fight them like any other wild encounter. Except for Cubone, all the Pokemon here, wild and trained, are from the Ghastly line, the only ghost type line in the game. The ghost type in Gen 1 has serious problems. We'll touch on one of them later, but it has a lot in common with the Dragon type in that both only have one evolution line each and there is a serious lack of moves for both types. Dragon types only have Dragon Rage, which deals a fixed 40 damage, and Ghost types only have Confuse Ray, which is a non-damaging move that confuses the opponent, Nightshade, which deals damage equal to the user's level, and Lick, which has pitiful power and a small chance of paralyzing the foe. At the very least, the only fully evolved Ghost and Dragon types, Gengar and Dragonite, are fantastic Pokemon with great stats and wide move pools. At least, wide move pools by Gen 1 standards. It's too bad Gengar is one of the Pokemon you can only get through Trade Evolution, meaning most players won't have the chance to get one, but Haunter isn't too bad if you can't evolve it. Once you reach the ghost blocking the top, you'll discover that it's Marowak, the Pokemon Team Rocket killed, and it's restless in death. Since you can identify it now, you can pacify it by defeating it. It's the only wild Pokemon you can't catch. Alternatively, you can exploit buggy programming by using a Pokédoll to flee the battle, which the game still counts as a victory for you. That's right, the whole Team Rocket hideout can be bypassed because of a plush toy. That's not the end of Team Rocket by a long shot though, as they've taken Mr. Fuji hostage at the top of the tower. That said, they're as easy to dispatch as their cohorts at the hideout and go down in short order. Mr. Fuji thanks you for saving him and recognizes your compassion for Pokemon, giving you the Pokeflute as thanks, which can awaken any sleeping Pokemon. This works in battle too, so awakenings are now completely worthless. With the Pokeflute in hand, a lot more of Kanto is opened up to us, and we have the choice between going south of Lavender Town, going to Cycling Road, or going to Saffron City. Since we're already here, we'll go to the south of Lavender Town, where we can wake up the Snorlax and hopefully catch it. It's a great pick for any team, but since there's only two, you should take caution while trying to catch it. While we're here, we can pick up the Item Finder, which one of Professor Oak's aides gives you if you have 30 or more Pokemon registered in your Pokedex. If you don't worry too much, the item finder is garbage. It tells you if there is or isn't an item nearby, and that's about it. It won't even tell you what direction it is, just a vague, "It's there, I promise." What isn't garbage is the super rod given to you by another fishing guru just further past Snorlax. This is the best fishing rod in the game and is totally missable. Picking it up is a great idea if you still need a water type in your team, so you can fish up almost every water type in the game with this in hand if you're in the right place. The trek through the rest of this route is lengthy, if only because of the amount of trainers in your path. None of them are particularly challenging at this point, but they'll wear down your power points in no time. It's a good spot to train, earn money, and to find new Pokemon if you're still looking to fill out your team. This seems like a good time to mention how critical hits work in this generation, since they work differently here than in every other generation. In other generations, critical hits ignore hindering stat modifiers, think Growl and Defense Curl, to deal double damage and have roughly a 6% chance of occurring. In Generation 1, however, critical hits are broken in weird and wonderful ways. They ignore all stat modifiers, positive and negative, leading to situations where you can deal less damage with a critical hit than you would have otherwise. The big thing though is that critical hits are based on speed in Generation 1. Fast Pokemon like Jolteon have an enormous advantage as a result, sporting roughly a 25% critical hit rate. Keep this in mind for later, but needless to say, changing how that worked was a very necessary decision. After that gauntlet, you'll arrive in Fuchsia City and will spot the next gym on your way to the Pokemon Center. Before covering what you can do in Fuchsia, it's worth mentioning that the cycling road path is significantly faster with only a handful of trainers on a straight path downward. Fuchsia is the home of another gym, another one of the fishing guru who will give you the good rod, a small zoo showcasing uncommon Pokemon, and the Safari Zone, which we'll get back to after we finish this gym. This gym's gimmick revolves around the invisible walls, which are quite visible on the Super Game Boy and everything past it. There's a significant difficulty spike here. The trainers in Koga's gym go from around level 25 to around level 35. All of the Pokemon in the gym have good defenses, and strangely most of them are psychic despite this being a poison gym. Unprepared players will probably struggle here for some time, but the Soul Badge is worth the struggle as it lets us use Surf when we find it. You'll also receive the TM for Toxic, which inflicts bad poisoning, a more severe form that gradually deals more and more damage as turns go by, guaranteeing a knockout by turn 8 in most games. It's time for the Safari Zone, where you pay 500 Pokédollars to get in and play the Safari game, a widely hated game where you get 500 steps to explore the area and 30 Safari Balls to catch Pokémon. It's a great spot to fill up your Pokédex and add new members to your team. The catch? You can't use your own Pokemon. You can only throw balls, throw bait, and throw rocks to influence the wild Pokemon. Throwing rocks and bait is next to useless though, since rocks make the Pokemon more likely to run away and bait chops the capture rate in half. Since this is the only way to get certain Pokemon, Tauros, Kangaskhan, and Rhyhorn to name a few, you'll have to learn to live with it if you want to add them to your team. If you make it to the deepest part of the Safari Zone, you'll find the Gold Teeth, which the Warden is looking for, and the Secret House, where you'll be given the HM for Surf. In addition to letting you cross water, Surf is a fantastic move in its own right, one of the only ones worth teaching your Pokemon in every generation. Returning the Warden's Teeth gets you the HM for Strength, which is a solid move in this generation, but becomes worse as better options become available in future games. It can move boulders in the overworld though, which will become invaluable for progression. Speaking of, we have unfinished business in Saffron City, so it's time to tend to that. Walking around Saffron, you'll notice that Team Rocket grunts are blocking access to almost every building in the town. Even the gym is blocked off initially. The fighting dojo next to the gym isn't, and you can plow through these guys with relative ease for the choice between Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. These two are terrible in Generation 1, but get better as the series goes on. The only other building we can enter is the Silph Co building in the center of the city, and it's a whopping 11-floor dungeon crawling with rocket grunts and rocket line scientists. Like Route 12 to 14, this dungeon will drain your power points in short order, and to make things worse, there are warp pads all over the building that take you from one floor to another, making navigation extremely disorienting. Eventually, you'll stumble across the card key, used to access shutter doors throughout the building, and will eventually find a lady offering healing. Neat! After using another nearby warp tile, we once again meet up with our rival, who has no intentions of stopping Team Rocket and just wanted to fight you again. What a jerk! His team is much the same as it was last time, but his Pokemon all know at least one move that has same type attack bonus. With the exception of Alakazam though, they're all weak moves, making him more or less a pushover to any strong Pokemon. After his defeat, he brags about how he's going to challenge the Pokemon League and leaves you behind to deal with Team Rocket. Before we do that, the NPC in this room offers us the only Lapras in the game. If you don't have a water type at this point, Lapras is a fantastic option as it can learn Surf and will learn Ice Beam shortly through leveling up. That very Lapras might even help you in the next confrontation against Giovanni, who's using 2 ground types. Like the first fight with him though, none of his Pokemon have same type moves. Even without Lapras, any player who's come this far will probably win their first try. With that, Team Rocket leaves the city, and the president of Silphco rewards you with the Master Ball, an incredibly special Pokeball that has a 100% success rate on any wild Pokemon, something you'd be wise to save for a particularly challenging capture. And before I get a comment about it, this is one area where Gen 1 isn't hilariously buggy. Using a Master Ball bypasses the normal underlying formula behind Pokemon capture entirely and just tells the game this capture cannot fail. Master Ball in hand, it's time to head to the real gym, which features another tile warp puzzle. This is probably the opportune time to talk about the Psychic type. If fire, water, and grass are the equivalent of rock, paper, and scissors, Psychic is a nuke. It's only super effective against fighting and poison, but it's only resisted by other Psychic types. It also effectively has no weaknesses. The only weakness it has is to bug types, and every bug type move that deals damage deals pitiful damage. Psychic was meant to be weak to Ghost. There are NPCs in the game who tell you as much. But due to an error, Ghost type attacks, which to remind you there was only one damaging move from, deal no damage at all. Psychic types also tend to have high speed and special stats, the special stat in particular being a big sticking point. Special corresponds to both special attack and special defense. With a high special stat, you can dish out powerful attacks while also defending yourself very well against incoming special attacks. On top of all that, Generation 1 introduces the most poison types in the entire series, so a lot of the time you'll be facing something that's weak to Psychic. It's because of all this that Psychic types in Gen 1 are completely and utterly broken. It's downright rare to see a fully thought out team without at least one Psychic type in this generation. The gym leader here, Sabrina, is bound to prove that to you if you don't have an answer for it, be it in the form of a strong physical attacker or something faster than her Pokemon. Victory here nets us the Marsh Badge, and from here our next main destination is Cinnabar Island. We have 2 possible ways to get there, but first there's some things we can do with Surf near Cerulean City. Remember seeing this guy early in the game? Now that we have Surf, we can go talk to him and discover that this is Cerulean Cave, which only the Pokemon League champion can enter. That will be important later on, but for now we're heading back to Route 9, where the observant among you may have noticed a body of water stretching along the route near the Pokemon Center. This is one of the game's most well-kept secrets. There's only one NPC in the entire game who talks about it, and it's the last location to show up on your town map, which you may not have picked up at all. This secret dungeon is crawling with electric types that are difficult or impossible to find elsewhere. Pikachu, Magnemite, Voltorb, and Electabuzz if you're playing red. There's items scattered all over the place in this building, but some of them are traps, revealing level 40 Voltorb and level 43 Electrode upon trying to collect them. The Voltorb are tough, but the Electrode are tougher. Due to their high speed stat, especially an Electrode, they critically hit more frequently. If they decide to use self-destruct and it crits, you might find yourself down a Pokemon or barely hanging on. The useful items in this area, one of the game's only rare candies, the TM for Thunder, and a PP up, arguably make up for the risk of getting a Voltorb instead, but if that's not enough, at the end of the power plant is one of the game's 4 legendary Pokemon, Zapdos. Zapdos is a powerhouse, and wait, my box is full? Yes, this is one of the worst mechanics of Red and Blue. Most likely a memory constraint, PC storage boxes can only hold 20 Pokemon, and once filled up must be manually switched in order to continue catching wild Pokemon. This is one of the reasons it's strongly recommended to save before fighting any legendary Pokemon, the other being that if you knock it out, that's it. It's gone for good. After a quick trek back through the power plant, we could fight Zapdos for real. It's surprising that I've taken this long to describe how wild Pokemon capture works, but now seems like the best time to do so since Zapdos is essentially a boss fight. Capturing Pokemon is a balancing act. If you make your opponent faint, you can't capture it. The key is to get its health as low as possible and possibly inflict a status condition on it. Then use whatever kind of Pokeball you have on hand and hope it works out, all the while trying to make sure your team of Pokemon doesn't faint. Zapdos is no joke. While it only knows Thundershock and Drill Peck, Its high special stat makes every Thundershock hit fairly hard, and Drill Peck will likely tear through the unprepared. It's very possible to lose this encounter, but eventually, with enough patience and a bit of luck, you'll have yourself an incredibly strong team member, with a great type combination that leaves it weak only to the somewhat rare Ice type and the surprisingly uncommon Rock type attacks. With Zapdos in hand, our next destination is Cinnabar Island, and there's 2 ways to get there. We can travel south of Pallet for an easy trip, or we can go southwest of Fuchsia for a detour to the Seafoam Islands. Upon arriving, you'll see that there's no way through to Cinnabar Island but to go through the Seafoam Islands. This is why most people, myself included, will usually opt to go south of Pallet instead. Going through it can be worthwhile though. There's a few uncommon Pokemon inside the cave, and at the very bottom is another legendary if you can get to it. This cave is the first time we have to use Strength, and you'll have to use it fairly often. While getting to HM moves is intuitive since you just have to go to your party menu, select the Pokemon that knows the move you want to use, and select the move, it's not exactly convenient. This is especially true when you have to use Strength again every time you ascend or descend a floor, and by this point you're probably sick of pulling out the menu to cut down small trees and use Surf too. That gripe aside, there's a dungeon-wide puzzle using Strength in here that tasks you with pushing boulders into holes in the ground. You'll discover the purpose of this when you make it to the lower 2 floors of the dungeon. One waterway sweeps you up into the basement floor when you use it, and the other is too high current to swim on. The dungeon's maze-like design makes navigation confusing, and this isn't helped by the Game Boy's low screen resolution. It's still a satisfying dungeon once you get through it, but I wouldn't be surprised if the average player hasn't used an escape rope at least once in their lifetime in this dungeon. Once you get all the boulders through the holes to the south of the dungeon, you'll be able to surf on the fast-moving water and will encounter Articuno. Like Zapdos, Articuno is a tough opponent packing a powerful Ice Beam. Peck is probably in its moveset to make sure it doesn't completely decimate Pokemon worn down by the constant wild Pokemon encounters you're bound to face while navigating the maze-like layout of the dungeon. Using Ice Beam on Articuno myself brings up another point of contention with Gen 1. The way super effective damage is shown is sometimes incorrect. I won't get into the fine details as to why, but for instance, Ice Beam's not super effective against Articuno. Because Articuno is ice flying, it would be regularly effective, yet the game claims it's super effective. If I were to guess, errors like this, strange cases like almost every rock Pokemon being part ground type, and moves like Gust and Karate Chop being normal type instead of flying and fighting respectively, probably contributed to a lot of players not really grasping the type chart. With Articuno in hand, we just have to finish another small strength puzzle to stop the other flow of water from sweeping us away, and we find ourselves at the other exit, ready to head to Cinnabar Island. Cinnabar is a pretty small town, but there's a few points of interest. The Pokemon Lab hosts a lot of trades, but more importantly, this is the place where you can have your fossils restored. You'll find the fossil Pokemon to be pretty formidable. If you're still missing a team slot, these are pretty solid picks. The next gym is also here, but it's locked. The key is inside the ruins of the Pokemon Mansion, the next required dungeon. The puzzle in this dungeon consists of flipping the switch on statues littered throughout the mansion to open up different rooms. Throughout the mansion, you'll find journal entries detailing the discovery and cloning of Mew, which led to the creation of Mewtwo and the destruction of the laboratory here. After getting to the deepest part of the basement, we get the secret key and can finally enter Blaine's gym, where we discover that our rival yet again has beaten us to the punch. Does that mean he purposely locked the door and threw the key away in the basement of the mansion for us to toil over? What a jerk! This gym's gimmick is these quiz machines in each room, which contain simple trivia questions about the game so far most players will be able to answer correctly. Getting questions right opens the way forward. Getting them wrong forces you to fight the trainer in the room. You could fight them after answering correctly anyway if you want some more experience and money, but it's potentially a straight shot to Blaine. Blaine's team is fairly tough, being high-leveled and knowing the TM he gives you, Fire Blast, but it's nothing you can't handle at this point. After he's done, the only gym left is the one we found locked at the start of the game in Viridian City. This gym's guide is apparently illiterate, since the statue he's standing next to tells you that the leader of this gym is none other than Giovanni, who set up his gym puzzle like the one in the Rocket Hideout, full of spin tile puzzles designed to waste your time and throw you off course. His team this time around is better than it has been. They're all fairly high-leveled, fully evolved Pokemon, but only his last Rhydon, which knows the one-hit KO move Fissure, will likely pose any threat. In hindsight, almost forcing a Lapras onto the player and mandating they have surf to get to Cinnabar Island, then having the last gym leader focus on ground types might not have been a great decision for difficulty balancing, since the player is practically guaranteed to have something that can sweep through the last two gyms with ease at this point in the game. With Giovanni defeated though, he gives us the final gym badge and disbands Team Rocket, resolving the main villainous team plotline and finally letting us get to the Pokemon League. Once again, your rival stops you dead in your tracks demanding a battle. His team is the same as it was last time we fought him, but it's fairly unbalanced. His Pidgeot, Alakazam, Gyarados, and his starter all know powerful moves and will give you a challenge, but the other Pokemon on his team only know weak moves, making them complete pushovers. After taunting you again, what a jerk, he heads off toward the Pokemon League and we follow suit. We can finally get through the badge check gate, encountering guards along the way to verify that we have the necessary badge for progression each time. At the end lies Victory Road, the final dungeon between us and the Pokemon League. In the first room, there's a tile on the ledge above that cannot be walked on without putting the nearby boulder on a switch, and a boulder serving as a one-way door to the left. There's a lot of both of these throughout Victory Road. There's a small strength puzzle at the back of the room that's framed as a choice, but it's less of a choice and more of an inconvenience, since in order to claim both items, you have to reset the boulders by leaving the room. Minor nitpick? Probably, but it's annoying and I've never understood why they made it like that. After another strength puzzle to make sure you've learned the boulder on switch concept, you'll find another switch but no boulder. If you've been to Seafoam already, you'll know to find one on the floor above. But if you haven't, it's not difficult to piece together. In a particularly cruel move, you have to push the boulder all the way down a long hallway into a room with a switch and a ladder. But if you use the ladder, your progress is completely undone and you have to push the boulder all over again. Combine this with the high-leveled wild Pokemon and trainers littered throughout with high-leveled, mostly fully evolved Pokemon, and you have a gauntlet that will test your endurance and wear down on your Pokemon's PP very quickly. Going down the aforementioned ladder isn't so bad though, as it leads to the last legendary bird, Moltres. Like the others, Moltres is also a fantastic Pokemon this time around. And if you still need a final team member, well, why not, right? After pushing the boulder down the hole and onto the switch, you're out of Victory Road and enter the Pokemon League, fitted with a full Pokemon Center and a Pokemart stocked with the best inventory in the game. Only a few more fights to go from here. 4 in a row, no turning back. First up is Lorelei, who specializes in ice types. Right away you'll notice the jump in levels to the mid-50s. The boost in stats that comes with higher levels will likely be the hardest thing to overcome here, and it only gets tougher as you move on. A problem every Elite Four member has is in regard to Pokemon moveset choice. Lorelei's Lapras has a good moveset, but none of the other members of her team have very strong movesets. Since most of her Pokemon are water and ice type, those without a good electric type will probably struggle a lot in here, and have to retry until they finally break through to the next member, Bruno. Bruno specializes in fighting types, but despite there being 5 fully evolved fighting types in the game, 2 of his Pokemon are Onix. And at this point in the game, Onix is a complete pushover. Not to say the others aren't. The only one that may give you any trouble is Machamp, who can use Fissure to one-hit KO you. After Bruno is Agatha, who has the extremely questionable choice of being a Ghost-type specialist when there is only one fully evolved Ghost-type. It's more appropriate to call her a Poison-type specialist. At the end of the game, in a generation where Psychic is extremely effective. The only thing she has going for her is the ability to confuse you with almost all her Pokemon, so it's very likely you'll make it through to Lance, another confusing specialist who specializes in Dragon types, but instead primarily uses Flying types. His team is formidable, however, with every team member sporting Hyper Beam, an extremely powerful move that takes a turn to recharge afterward, but that turn is skipped in Gen 1 if it knocks the opponent out. Lorelei and Lance are the biggest roadblocks in the Elite Four. But if you can get through them, you learn there's one more opponent and come face to face with the champion. Your rival. That's right, he beat you to the punch one final time. His lineup is the same as last time, and unfortunately the best Pokemon are the same as last time as well. You're facing an arguably easier fight if you chose Charmander, as he won't have a Gyarados with Hyper Beam. But either way, the level difference is the main source of challenge here, with his starter coming in at level 65. With a balanced team, or a massively over-leveled Pokemon, you'll eventually win the battle as Blue reluctantly gives over his short-lived title of champion to you. Professor Oak enters the room, chastises his grandson for mistreating his Pokemon, and leads you to the next room to register your Pokemon in the Hall of Fame. And with that, we're almost done. There's still post-game to tackle, although compared to later entries, Red, Blue, and Yellow don't have a lot to do. Since we're the Pokemon League champion now, we can head into Cerulean Cave, the final challenge in the game. This one is a multi-floor labyrinth, but it only requires Surf. No strength puzzles to confound and confuse here. Labyrinth is the key word. It's easy to get yourself turned around in here, and all the while you'll be encountering wild Pokemon at levels in the late 50s and early 60s, with some reaching as high as level 67. Like other optional dungeons, there's plenty of powerful items scattered throughout, but the real prize is at the bottom, Mewtwo. If your team wasn't already worn down from wild encounters, Mewtwo is fully prepared to rip you to shreds. If you kept your Master Ball, now is definitely the time to use it. If not, Mewtwo will put you to the test. It's a Psychic type with absurdly high stats and a dastardly moveset. Psychic will tear up anything that doesn't resist it. Barrier will make Mewtwo's only weak stat increase, making dealing damage to it even tougher. And Recover will undo any progress you make in an instant. The worst part is that due to the way Gen 1 works, your opponents will never expend PP. You can dish out damage until you have no moves left to use, and Mewtwo can still undo all of your progress in an instant. Once you triumph though, you're in possession of the strongest Pokemon of the game, and what was for a very long time the strongest Pokemon of the entire series. So what's after this? You can complete your Pokédex, which to some is intrinsically rewarding. For those who need an extrinsic reward, however, I'll spare you the time and energy. This is all you get. There's a different one each generation, but the diploma is always the ultimate reward for Pokédex completion, and only recently has there started to be any other reward along with it. For the really curious, I've already explained how Red and Blue are buggy, but nothing explains this more than several of its most infamous glitches, which you can try out. The Missing No glitch, the Mew glitch, Glitch City, Experience Underflow. Gen 1 has a lot of glitches to play with if you're interested in glitch hunting. So ultimately, what do I think of Generation 1? There's no doubt these games have earned their place in history. Red and Blue set the foundation for the entire Pokemon franchise, and the formula they put into place, leave town with rival, collect gym badges, defeat evil team, become champion, is a formula still in use to this day. A lot of people will argue that Blue is the best rival in the series because he's such a jerk to you that it pushes you to get better than he is. That said, Red, Blue, and Yellow are the games I'm least likely to go back to when I'm in the mood to play Pokemon. The problems I've been over don't seem like big deals on paper, but the series has had 20 years filled with new entries since then. The graphics have evolved, region design has evolved, Pokemon design has evolved, and the gameplay has evolved. Kanto is a very well-designed region, with lots of secrets and a few memorable moments. Lavender Town and reading about the creation of Mewtwo come to mind. But nearly everything that comes afterwards is more interesting in one way, shape, or form. In the next video, we'll be moving on to Generation 2 with Pokemon Crystal, and you'll see just how much of a difference 3 years can make. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you could leave a like and/or comment down below. And if you want to see more of these long-form analysis videos in the future, please consider subscribing. Until next time, I'm Forma, and those are my thoughts.